Hey, what you reading for?
John Lithgow is an actor I appreciate a lot. I have seen him be great in dramas and comedy and in horror. And I really like when an actor that I like explores the reach of their talents. And I think John Lithgow is a great example of that. And he is also a book lover, which is cool. And recently I found an article where he talks about some of his favorite books. I'll leave a link to the article in the description box, but in this video we'll go through the article together. There are 10 books, only one of which I have read, and I did not care for it, if I'm being honest. And there are also 2 books that are on my TBR, meaning that I'll most likely read them later this year or perhaps the next. So let's jump in and have a look at this article and talk books. First up, we have Sabbath's Theater by Philip Roth. This is not a book that I had heard of prior to looking at this article. Philip Roth, of course, I'd heard of. I've only had one experience with Philip Roth. I read The Humbling, which I quite liked, but I definitely need to read more from Philip Roth. John Lithgow, he says, this is one crazy book, but I just love it. It's about a reckless old out-of-work puppeteer named Mickey Sabbath, who gets himself in all kinds of trouble out of sheer libidinous self-destructiveness. Roth wrote it with exuberant abandon, reflecting the character of Sabbath himself. That is an appealing description. I like a reckless old. Those are 2 qualities I like in a protagonist. I like my protagonists old and reckless. Out of work puppeteer. So I'm relating to this protagonist. I am not a puppeteer, but one could say I am reckless. One could say I'm old, and yes, I am out of work. However, sheer libidinous self-destructiveness. Those are 2 things I like in a protagonist in a work of fiction. I like self-destruction and I like libidinous. I'm not sure if I'd like them together, libidinous, self-destruction. I like self-destruction, but maybe the libidinous could save the protagonist. That would be interesting too. Nevertheless, Sabbath's Theater sounds promising. It's on my radar. Moving on. Next, we have The Last Lion by William Manchester. This is a biography of William Churchill, written by an American. I do not read nonfiction, hardly ever. I have a strong aversion to reality, so only fiction. So this is not a book I will be checking out. Let's hear what John Lithgow has to say about it. Reading Manchester's 3 Churchill biographies is a mammoth undertaking, but it gives an epic account of an extraordinary life, undoubtedly. I took on the role of Churchill recently, and Manchester's magnum opus was my indispensable handbook. So that is interesting to me. That appeals to me. I like when an actor has to get into the role, so they'll read a book, or the book that the movie or the play is based on, or the character is based on. So that is interesting. It gets my imagination going. Like I'm imagining, like when John Lithgow was playing the crazy preacher guy in Footloose, like what book did he read that helped him find the character, you know? Or when he acted in Raising Cain, where he played this crazy guy with split personality. What book did he read? That's a fun mental exercise. It might make a fun video too, the books that a particular actor read to get into their characters. Moving on, we have Absalom, Absalom! By William Faulkner. I have never read William Faulkner before. Let's hear what John Lithgow has to say about this. I have to include Faulkner, and I feel like I have to read Faulkner. If you've had experience with this author, if you like this author, which book would you recommend I start with to have my first Faulkner experience? With multiple narrators, shifts in time, and sentences that go on for 1,000 words, it is an Everest-like challenge. Okay, so I know about Everest-like challenges. I am currently undergoing one. Now, I have recently started reading Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, which is 900 words, and it has sentences that go on for lines and lines and lines and lines. And it's quite a challenging read. John Lithgow goes on, but its epic story of the doomed Sutpin dynasty is a masterpiece of Southern literature. Read it slowly, you pretty much have to, and savor every word. So this book is apparently an Everest-like challenge. However, it is a short book. It's around 300 pages. That's not too Everest-like. Gravity's Rainbow is 900 pages. I do feel like I need to read William Faulkner. I'm not sure if Absalom is the book to start with. I really don't know. I don't know that much about Faulkner. Moving on. A Bright Shining Lie by Neil Sheehan. This is also a work of nonfiction. This is the most gripping book I've read about the Vietnam War, written by a New York Times journalist who, along with David Halberstam, was one of the best on-the-ground chroniclers of that chapter in our history. And because it focuses on one single indelible character, it reads like a great novel. I'm sure it does. I would rather read a great novel than I try to avoid reality as much as I can. Next up, we have The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan. Here's a novel of intimate emotion and a historical sweep. It tells the twin stories of an Australian doctor's melancholy love affair and his appalling experience as a war prisoner building the Burma Railway. Most potently, Flanagan makes use of his own father's real-life biography in telling his story. I do not have a lot of experience with Australian literature, which is something I need to correct. I think off the top of my head, I think the only Australian book I've read is Picnic at Hanging Rock. I think that's it. So yeah, I need to read more Australian literature. Should I read Richard Flanagan? John Lithgow thinks I should. Although this one doesn't really speak to me. It is based on a real life story, so real life, there's the red flag for me, right? And it talks about an experience as a prisoner of war. I don't know about that one. Moving on. Common Ground, A Turbulent Decade in the Lives of Three American Families by J. Anthony Lucas, another work of nonfiction. This is another terrific piece of journalism written years ago about an even earlier time. It's a portrait of the city of Boston during the racial strife of the 60s and 70s. Lucas tracks the lives of three families, African American, Irish, and upwardly mobile Yankee, to bring the struggle of that era back to life. This is a lauded book. I've heard other people praise this book as well. So I'm inclined to believe that it is excellent. But it is not something that appeals to me. Next up, we have another work of nonfiction. Celebrity book lists, they are lousy with nonfiction. Always a lot of nonfiction. But this one is Act 1 by Moss Hart. This is a book, Act 1, that I have heard many people tell me how amazing this book is. So, and I'm sure it is. Moss Hart's memoir of his early years, he died too young to produce Act 2, remains the gold standard among books about the American theater. Fully half of it is about his collaboration with George S. Kaufman on A Once in a Lifetime, Heart's Breakthrough Success. It is the best description of the creative process of theater that I've ever read. And now here John Lithgow is echoing a sentiment that I have heard from many people, from several friends who are in the theater, several actors. And I do love theater. If I were to read nonfiction, if ever I had a moment where I dared explore reality, this book, Act One, would probably be the high on my list of nonfiction to read. Too many people whose opinions I respect, too many of them have told me what a great book this is. Moving on, we have The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. Atwood keeps several plates spinning in this engrossing novel. What a gleeful storyteller she is. Her book is part family saga and part gothic fantasy with a plot twist near the end which casts the whole book in a dazzling new light. This book, The Blind Assassin, is on my TBR. I do plan on getting to it. I don't know if I'll get to it this year. It's kind of a big book, but I'll get to it soon enough. I've only had one experience with Margaret Atwood's work, and as happens to me frequently, I think I chose the wrong book to start with. I read one of her earlier books. I believe it was her second book called Surfacing, or The Surfacing, and I did not like it. I gave it 1 star, actually. Really didn't like it. But she's such an important writer and successful writer, I feel like I need to give her a second chance, or give her work another chance. And The Blind Assassin is the one I'm gravitating towards. John Lithgow mentions that she is a gleeful storyteller, which is exciting because in The Surfacing there is no glee, there is bitterness and anger. That's what I got out of it. So I would be, I'm happy to explore something from her that is more gleeful, if you will. So I look forward to reading The Blind Assassin. And I thank Mr. Lithgow for reminding me that I need to get to it. Next up, we have Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. South African writer. This is the book on the list that I have read. This is a Man Booker Prize winner, and this is not a book that I liked. It is a very dark and dreary and ugly. It's beautiful. I mean, it's expertly written. I can say that it is very well written, but it's not a pleasant book. Not a pleasant book at all. A tough read. John Lithgow begins or says, "Warning, this is one of the most upsetting books I've ever read." Yes, I would echo that sentiment. It's one of the most upsetting is the word. Yeah, upsetting. But it's a great one. Okay, here we differ, but that's okay. Set in South Africa, a nation struggling to remake itself in the wake of apartheid, it tracks a professor's downfall as he suffers a career-ending scandal, followed by a horrific episode in the life of his daughter. It's a Booker Prize winning book by a Nobel-winning novelist. Right, so we have these two horrific events, horrific, ugly events that happen. One that the protagonist or this professor is responsible for, and one that he is not. And I don't really know what these two events, how they go together in the theme of this book, but they are both upsetting. Yes, it does not paint South Africa in a pleasant light. And lastly, we have Commonwealth by Anne Patchett, and this is the second book on the list that is on my TBR. I am not familiar with Anne Patchett. I've never read her work, but I know that Commonwealth was a big hit and won many awards, and I've heard good things about it, so it's on my TBR. Let's hear what John Lithgow has to say about it. Anne Patchett makes use of haunting events in her own life, which, coupled with her storytelling skills, lend her book an extra layer of emotional intensity. If you have siblings, which I do, and especially if you have half-siblings, no, as far as I know, my sister is in one piece. If you have siblings, it will bring your own childhood back to vivid life. Ooh, geez. That is not what I want. I have gone to great lengths to make sure my childhood does not come back into vivid life. But that's the danger of reading, isn't it? Sometimes a book can cause memories to come back. One day in the near future, I will be brave and I will read this book. So I think this is a good list. We have a bit more nonfiction than I would care for, but I think that's to be expected from these celebrity book lists. But still, there are several works of fiction that seem appealing. There are no works in translation. It is mostly Americans. We have one Australian, one South African, one Canadian, and 7 American writers, which is fine. It would be nice to have a book or two in translation, but I think he does a good job explaining what he likes about the books and also making the book sound appealing, which is very good and not surprising from John Lithgow. Do you have any experience with the books I talked about in this video? What do you think of the list? I look forward to hearing your opinions and your feedback. I look forward to connecting with you in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.